Welcome back to Fusty Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. David Cole was the kind of man the tabloids called Britain's most eligible widower. His empire, Cole Innovations, stretched across Europe, yet his heart still ached from losing his first wife, Evelyn. For years, David poured his soul into work, and his triplet sons, Caleb, Liam, and Noah, determined to give him the kind of love he'd lost. But the mansion in Surrey remained empty, cold, and silent without a woman's touch. When Cynthia walked into his life, a charming event planner with grace and gentle eyes, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. She seemed kind to his children, patient with his elderly mother, and humble despite his wealth. To David, she was an answer to prayer. After months of courting, he proposed in a candlelit garden, unaware he was welcoming a storm into his home. Everyone celebrated their union. The media called it the love story of the year. His mother, Grace, prayed that Cynthia's love was genuine. Yet behind her polite smile, Cynthia's eyes carried calculation. She studied the mansion, the staff, and David's every weakness. To her, it wasn't love, it was conquest. And as the Cole family celebrated a new chapter, Cynthia silently planned her domination of the household, starting the moment David jet left for his next business trip. At first, Cynthia's transformation was subtle. She stopped smiling as soon as David's car left the gate. Her voice hardened, her laughter vanished. Within days, she began issuing cruel orders. Grandma Grace was told to scrub the marble floors for exercise, and the triplets, barely 10, were forced to wash plates, denied breakfast for minor mistakes. The servants watched in silence, afraid to interfere. Cynthia's cruelty didn't come from rage. It came from enjoyment. She found pleasure in power, in the fear reflected in their eyes. Grandma Grace tried to protect the boys, absorbing the humiliation in silence. "Don't cry, my loves," she whispered at night, her frail arms wrapped around them. "Your father will be home soon." But weeks passed, and David's trip extended. Cynthia seized total control, dismissing loyal staff and hiring her own spies. The once joyful mansion grew quiet, stripped of laughter and warmth. Grace's health began to decline, and the triplets, once bright and playful, became withdrawn, terrified to make a sound. In the absence of their father, the House of Cole was no longer a home. It was a prison ruled by their stepmother's rage. David's trip to Geneva was meant to last a month. He was negotiating a merger that could double his company's value. Yet despite his success, something felt wrong. Calls home were brief. Cynthia always answered before the children could. "Everything's fine, darling," she said sweetly, but her tone felt rehearsed. When he asked to speak to his mother, Cynthia claimed Grace was resting. David's intuition screamed that something was off. He noticed his children no longer sent voice notes, and his driver avoided eye contact when asked about the household. Unable to shake his unease, David decided to surprise his family with an early return. He told no one, not even his assistant. As his private jet lifted off for London, his mind played the image of Grace's gentle smile and the boys' laughter. He didn't know that back home, the mansion he loved had turned into a scene of suffering, and that his arrival would reveal the cruelest truth of all. That morning in Surrey, the sky was gray and rain soaked the garden. Grandma Grace knelt outside, scrubbing the stone patio with trembling hands while Cynthia stood above her, holding a bucket of muddy water. The boys begged her to stop, but Cynthia only laughed. "You'll learn to respect me," she spat, and before anyone could move, she poured the filthy water over Grace's head. The elderly woman gasped, shivering. Her gray hair plastered her face as the triplets screamed in horror. Unseen by her, a black car had stopped just beyond the gate. Inside sat David and his driver, Mark. The sight froze David's soul. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. His mother on her knees, his sons crying. His wife, a woman he thought heaven sent, was a monster behind it all. Mark, horrified, pulled out his phone and began recording. David's fists clenched so hard they bled. The betrayal hit him like a dagger through the chest. He'd left them in her care, and she'd turned his sanctuary into a house of torment. The moment Cynthia turned away, David stepped out of the car, his presence towering, silent, deadly. Everyone froze. Her laughter died in her throat as she saw him standing by the garden arch, drenched in rain, his eyes burning with fury and heartbreak. "Cynthia," he said quietly, voice shaking. "What have you done?" She stammered, trying to smile. Darling, this is what it looks like. But David didn't move. He gestured to Mark, who pressed play. The recording echoed through the courtyard, the splash, the screams, the insults. Cynthia's lies collapsed in seconds. David walked up to her, trembling with controlled rage. "That woman," he said, pointing at Grace, "raised me with love and faith. Those boys, my children, trusted you, and you repay that with cruelty." Tears blurred his vision, but he didn't blink. He turned to the staff. "Pack her things. Now!" The silence was deafening as guards moved forward. Cynthia's mask shattered. "You can't do this to me." "I'm your wife," she screamed, but David's face was stone. "No," he whispered. "You were my mistake." As Cynthia's suitcases hit the marble floor, the house trembled with tension. Grace sat wrapped in a blanket, her frail body shaking. The children clung to her, crying. David knelt beside his mother, guilt flooding every vein. "I'm so sorry, Mum," he whispered, kissing her trembling hands. "I left you with a serpent." Grace only smiled weakly. "You didn't know, my son. God brought you back in time." Her forgiveness pierced deeper than any rebuke. It reminded David that even the purest hearts could suffer silently in the name of love. Cynthia's screams echoed down the hall as security escorted her out. Cameras flashed outside the gate. News had already spread. She turned toward them, putting on her sweetest smile, pretending she was a victim. But David wasn't fooled. That night, he released a video to his legal team. The world would know what she'd done, not out of vengeance, but justice. And as the mansion fell silent again, he realized how much healing his family would need to rebuild what she had almost destroyed. Within 24 hours, the footage leaked. The internet exploded with outrage. The billionaire's wife from hell trended across social media. Public sympathy poured in for Grace and the children, while Cynthia became a national scandal. Brands cut ties, her friends abandoned her, and her polished public image shattered like glass. But David didn't gloat. He avoided interviews, focusing instead on his family's recovery. Behind the scenes, though, he hired investigators. Something about Cynthia's timing, the way she'd entered his life right before his merger with Kane Enterprises, felt calculated. When his lawyer confirmed that Cynthia had been receiving secret payments from Edward Kane's offshore account, David's blood ran cold. His marriage hadn't just been a mistake, it was a sabotage. The woman he loved had been sent to destroy him, personally and professionally. But Edward had underestimated one thing: David Cole's resilience. Edward Kane had always envied David. For years, his company failed to outshine Cole Innovations. Hiring Cynthia was his masterpiece of revenge. She was trained, beautiful, manipulative, and desperate for wealth. Edward promised her fortune if she could destabilize David emotionally, cause chaos at home, and make him abandon his business focus. Cynthia delivered perfectly, until David came home too soon. Now, as Edward watched his plan unravel on the news, he smashed his glass of whiskey in fury. His mole had been exposed, and David's moral victory had earned him more public support than ever. Investors rallied behind him. Employees returned with renewed loyalty. Edward's empire began to crumble. Meanwhile, David said nothing publicly. He didn't need revenge. Truth was already dismantling his enemy piece by piece. His silence became his loudest triumph. The Cole mansion slowly came back to life. Grace recovered. The children smiled again, and the air smelled of peace for the first time in months. David devoted every evening to his family. Story time, dinner together, laughter that had once vanished. He apologized repeatedly, but his mother stopped him each time. "You did what you thought was best," she said gently. "We all fall for wolves wearing angel faces." Her words reminded him that forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was strength. David began attending therapy sessions with his sons, helping them rebuild trust. He also met with Cynthia's victims, former staff she had bullied, to ensure justice. Yet through all the pain, David learned a powerful truth. No wealth could replace genuine love, and no mansion was worth peace lost. In his heart, he made a promise to rebuild, not for image, but for purpose. Months later, David stood before a crowd at a press conference in London. Cameras flashed as he announced the launch of the Grace Cole Foundation, dedicated to supporting widows, elderly women, and children recovering from domestic abuse. His mother sat in the front row, tears shining in her eyes. "This," he said, "is not just about charity. It's about honor. My mother taught me that family is sacred and kindness is power. The audience applauded, moved by his sincerity. Reporters called it the billionaire's redemption story. But for David, it was something deeper. The scars Cynthia left behind became seeds for transformation. Grace's name now stood as a symbol of survival. As the event ended, David hugged his mother tightly, whispering, "We're home again, Mum." And for the first time in a long time, the Cole mansion was filled not with wealth, but with peace and the echo of laughter that once made a true home. Cynthia resurfaced months later. The tabloids caught her lurking outside Cole Innovations, trying to stage a scene for sympathy. Gone was the polished woman David once married. What stood before him was a shadow of pride and regret. Security tried to escort her away, but David stopped them. For a long moment, they stood face to face in the drizzle of a London afternoon, two souls bound by betrayal and pain. "Why, Cynthia?" he asked quietly. Her lips trembled, and for the first time, her arrogance cracked. "He promised me freedom. I thought I could handle it." "I didn't know your mother would be so kind," she whispered. David looked at her, a thousand emotions warring within him. "You destroyed kindness," he said, voice steady but cold. "Not just mine, but that of innocent people who did nothing to you." She cried, begging for another chance, but David shook his head. "Forgiveness isn't a door back into my life. It's the only way I can let you go." He turned and walked away, leaving Cynthia sobbing in the rain. That day, David realized forgiveness wasn't about weakness. It was about power over pain. Edward Kane's empire was unraveling fast. The investigation David launched with quiet precision had unearthed years of fraud, tax evasion, and illegal transfers. One by one, Edward's partners withdrew, fearing association. The man who once gloated over David's downfall now faced ruin. When authorities raided his Canary Wharf office, David watched from a distance, not with vengeance, but with calm justice. Karma, he thought, always arrived on time. In a stunning twist, Cynthia's testimony became the final blow. Hoping for leniency, she exposed Edward's schemes to the media. "He used me," she confessed tearfully on national television. But the world wasn't sympathetic. She was a pawn who betrayed a good man, and now both she and her master fell together. David watched the headlines the next morning, closed the newspaper, and smiled faintly. He finally had peace, not from destroying others, but from rising above them. As life settled, David spent more time with Grace, taking long walks through the gardens of the mansion. She was weaker now, age catching up, but her spirit glowed brighter than ever. "Do you know why God allowed the storm?" she asked one evening. "To remind you that wealth is a tool, not a throne. You used to build companies, now you build people." Her words sank deep into David's heart. He realized his mother had been his compass all along, the gentle voice that never lost faith, even when the world shook. Grace began mentoring young widows through the foundation. Her warmth attracted women from all backgrounds who found strength in her story. David watched proudly as the Grace Cole Foundation expanded across the UK, turning pain into purpose. For him, the mansion that once symbolized betrayal had become a temple of resilience. Every laughter from the children, every letter from a woman felt like a piece of heaven restored. David's transformation reached beyond his home. He restructured Cole Innovations, creating a division dedicated to affordable housing and family welfare. Shareholders doubted him at first. Philanthropy wasn't profit, but David didn't care. "Legacy outlives wealth," he told them. "Let's build both." His renewed moral compass inspired employees. Former rivals began collaborating, and public trust soared. Meanwhile, the media turned their narrative around. Articles once obsessed with his personal scandal now hailed him as the billionaire with a heart. Invitations to global summits poured in, but David chose to stay close to home, guiding his sons and spending evenings by Grace's bedside. The empire still thrived, but this time it was built on peace rather than power. He had learned that real greatness wasn't measured in assets, but in compassion. One afternoon, David received a letter from a young journalist named Amelia Brooks, the same reporter who'd uncovered Edward's crimes. She requested an interview about forgiveness and leadership. Something about her sincerity intrigued him, so he agreed. When she arrived, she wasn't what he expected, modestly dressed with intelligent eyes and an empathetic spirit. Their conversation flowed naturally. She asked about his mother, his children, and the meaning of redemption. Unlike others, she didn't chase headlines. She sought humanity. Days later, Her article titled, "The Man Who Forgave the Storm," went viral. It painted David not as a victim or a hero, but as a man reborn. The piece touched millions, and letters of gratitude flooded the foundation. Grace smiled when she read it. "Maybe, my son," she said softly, "God's not done writing your story." David laughed, unaware that Amelia would soon play a part in a new chapter of his life. Over the next few months, Amelia became a familiar face at the Cole residence, helping document the foundation's progress. The children adored her, especially little Noah, who often followed her around with endless questions. Grace, too, grew fond of her. "She has Evelyn's heart," she told David one evening. He hesitated, still haunted by the fear of loving again, but Amelia's kindness slowly melted his walls. She never tried to impress him. She simply understood him. One evening, as they worked late on a charity proposal, a power cut plunged the study into darkness. They laughed awkwardly as candles flickered to life. "You rebuilt everything except your own heart," Amelia said gently. David met her gaze, realizing how true that was. "Maybe it's time," he whispered. In that moment, something shifted, two wounded souls finding quiet understanding in the glow of candlelight. Months later, Grace passed away peacefully in her sleep. The house mourned deeply. David held her hand until her last breath, tears soaking the blanket she had knitted for his sons. The funeral drew hundreds, but it was a private moment afterward that shattered him. In her final letter, Grace wrote, "Don't grieve too long, my son. Love again. Forgive always. Let kindness be your crown." Those words became his life's compass. The triplets, now older, comforted him in ways he didn't expect. Caleb whispered, "Grandma said she'd be proud if we made you smile again." David smiled weakly and hugged them tight. Through their shared pain, they grew stronger. Grace's presence lingered like a soft fragrance in every corner of the mansion, a reminder that love, once sown, never truly dies. In the months following Grace's passing, David poured his heart into expanding the foundation internationally. Amelia became its media director, working side by side with him. Their shared vision turned into shared laughter, late-night brainstorming, and eventually unspoken affection. When reporters began speculating, David didn't deny it. For once, he wasn't afraid of love. During a charity gala in London, David honored his mother's memory with a speech that silenced the room. "My mother taught me that true wealth is not in what we keep, but what we give," he said. The audience rose in applause. Afterward, as the night air cooled, he turned to Amelia and said, "She would have liked you." Amelia smiled. "She already does," she replied. And just like that, peace and companionship returned to David's heart. A year later, David and Amelia married in a small countryside chapel surrounded by close friends, Grace's favorite hymns echoing through the air. The triplets stood proudly beside him, carrying their grandmother's portrait. It wasn't the grand ceremony the media expected. It was simple, pure, filled with gratitude. Love isn't about perfection, Amelia whispered during their vows. It's about healing together. Their honeymoon was quiet, a retreat to the Scottish Highlands where David finally allowed himself to rest. For the first time in years, he felt complete. The ghost of betrayal had faded, replaced by the steady warmth of peace. And as he looked at Amelia under the starlit sky, he knew that pain had been the path that led him home. Years later, the Cole mansion became the headquarters of the Grace Cole Foundation. Portraits of Grace, Evelyn, and the early volunteers adorned the hallways. David and Amelia's love continued to bloom, their story inspiring millions through global outreach programs. The triplets grew into compassionate young men, each carrying a piece of their grandmother's wisdom and their father's humility. Standing before a crowd at the Foundation's 10th anniversary, David looked around. The laughter of children, the joy of families restored, the light that had replaced the shadows of his past. "Life tested us," he said, voice steady. "But we found that love, real love, isn't what you find in comfort. It's what survives the storm." The audience rose in applause, tears and smiles blending. As the sun set over Surrey, David looked toward the sky and whispered, "We did it, Mum." And somewhere beyond the clouds, Grace surely smiled. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.